Hayden, have you got the controls to the aircon?
No.
At the moment.
Aircon, bit cool.
Can you turn it down another 20?
I was going to say, you're a bit...
Yeah, we're trying to relative.
Yeah. We've turned on the... I don't know. Oh, have we turned on the weather? Probably not.
It's probably a bit warmer than I'd like, but...
Yeah. Okay. Thanks everyone for coming along. Justin's given me the job to introduce our guest this evening because it was partially my doing and roping Paul in here. So he's handed me the Antarctic AR article, which I think was last article, previous to the one that's just come out. And you wrote a very nice piece in there, and there you are down in Casey. And I also did an interview with you as well back when you were down there in May, I think.
Yeah, ages ago.
Yep. So anyway, you're back after a very long stint down in Antarctica, so we'd like to hand over to Paul VK0PD, who'll go through his journey down in Antarctica. Thank you, Paul.
Cheers, Hayden. Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for inviting me along. It's really good to see some new faces after nearly a year down there with the same 27 people, or 26 others. Yeah, a little bit about myself. I sort of was interested in radio since I was a kid. Was in the CBs and that when I was about 13 years old, and back then you had to do Morse, and I couldn't do that. I wasn't smart enough for Morse, so fast forward a couple of years, and I've done just about everything I've wanted to ever do. I went down to Antarctica for the first time and found out about radio, and went down for the second time and had some chats with some electronics engineers and found out that they dropped the requirement for Morse, and tried to get my foundation before I went in 16, 17. And I think that's when I first came here and I met Justin and maybe a few other people here. And that didn't happen for me. Couldn't organise an exam before I went, so I went back down, and as soon as I got back I went and did my foundation, and since then I've upgraded to advanced. So I've been down 3 times to Antarctica now. In 2015 I summited at Casey Station. In 2016-17 I summited and wintered at Davis, and this past year I've wintered at Casey again. So it's been a pretty awesome experience to be able to go and do that kind of stuff, and luckily I managed to squirrel my way into getting to operate a radio down there. So I've got a couple of photos I've put together, just grabbed off the phone and whatnot. I would have liked to have done something a bit better, but when Hayden got onto me about it, is right in the time where things there turn into a nightmare when you get all the new people and it's busy. So unfortunately this is all I've got. But my trades, I'm an industrial electrician by trade and also an instrument technician, so I've got 2 trades. And this year I was also what they call the building services supervisor, who's sort of in charge of all the tradespeople down there, so plumbers, carpenters and whatnot, and also the deputy station leader, so I was second in charge there for a while. So yeah, the photo here shows Casey. I'm not sure how many people are familiar, I know a few of you are. This section up here is where we live, this big red building, it's called the Red Shed. Down there, this was the old station area, and we've still got quite a few buildings. We've got a wharf and a fuel tank down there, and you can see that's a photo in the summer where they've got the road cut through. So the first thing I did when I got to Casey was I did a bit of a site survey, because I'd spoken to Kim Briggs before I went down to sort of get the lowdown on where I could operate down there, and he gave me a few suggestions. And when I got there I was pretty blown away by how bad the noise was. Some really serious noise. So I tried down there, I tried out here, and I ended up just here. So hopefully this works. So this is a view from Casey from back down towards the water looking up. This is an older photo, so there's a new section of building here now called the East Wing. That's where we live, and just there's a little shack that I operated from called the Hobby Hut. So Casey's a pretty nice sort of weather place. We don't get really cold, we get maximums of about -30, -35. So in Antarctic terms, it's pretty tame weather. I think our top wind speed this year was 117 knots. So yeah, other stations get it worse. It was far colder when I was at Davis. So here's a photo of just, I threw the 705 on because it was easy to move around. And this is the kind of noise, 20 metres and up was pretty good. Anything below 20 metres started to get a bit noisy, but you've got all these little birdies everywhere. And later in my season I did track down where they came from. Made a little mag loop and did a bit of direction finding like a real nerd does. And got some really weird looks from all the other people with me walking down the street with a mag loop. But it turned out to be some speed controllers on our generators were faulty and we didn't have spares, so unfortunately I couldn't swap them out. But yeah, that was the typical sort of operating environment I'd work in, and the killer was when you'd speak to someone and you'd have to QSY to a different frequency for whatever reason, they'd always seem to pick one of these birdies. And in hindsight, I should have been smart enough to write down the no-go frequency zones, but I didn't learn that lesson until like September, so probably a little bit slow off the mark there. And just if you've got any questions too, feel free to stop in. To jump in. So this was my my humble little setup initially. It looks really, really neat, and it stayed really, really neat for a whole of about 10 minutes. So you can see there I've got my modified little old computer ATX power supply and a giant linear power supply I pulled out of a repeater at home. So I'm running a HLA-300 HLA-305 amp there from RM Italy, and that was a bit of a power pig, so it took everything that linear power supply had to offer, and I only needed to do about 35 watts drive out of the ICOM to get 400 watts out, so the little ATX power supply worked quite well. The building I'm working out of here is called the Hobby Hut. So the idea behind the Hobby Hut is most of your people on station are like me, they're tradies, got a good background in machinery and whatever, so we've got our own workshops. We can go between the different workshops and do whatever we want, our little projects or whatever. But you get scientists down, you get operations people down, and it's just too high a risk having them in like a full-size workshop, so they've got this building set aside. The big advantage with the Hobby Hut is in wintertime, we're all tradies pretty much, so we use our main workshop and this place is just derelict. So I set up in here, had a phone working later on. We couldn't get the phone working early in the season, which is a whole other issue. But it was pretty close to the red shed. So if I go back, oh, too far. So yeah, that's where I lived, and it was just over there. So it was literally like 100 metres walk away. So it was quite convenient to get to for me. So I did pretty much all of my operating from there, and I learned a really valuable lesson early on. When you're doing a lot of contacts, you can't use a hand mic because you just get cramps. Like I don't really think I'm weak, but just pressing that button over and over and over and holding it, it just wears you down. So in a second I'll have a beautiful foot switch coming up. This is what it generally looked like. Everything's shoved back at the moment because the roof above me leaks. So a really important factor in Antarctica is you can have one or two things. You can have a warm building, you can have a dry building, but you can't have both. So we have warm buildings, and what happens is you get snow lands on the roof. The sun hits the roof, heats the roof expands and contracts, the snow melts, goes down between all the joins, and tends to drip right on your really expensive laptop and radio, which I found out the hard way, but luckily nothing was damaged. So I had quite a good setup here. I grabbed that little old oscilloscope, a little Tektronix unit from my workshop. We had a couple of those there. And I spent quite a bit of time just doing some experiments. I had spectrum analyzers out to check my amplifier for linearity and whatnot. And I can comment on those amps now and say they are a really clean output at 400. If you drove much harder, I don't think they'd be very good, but at 400 watts it worked really, really well. So, being in Antarctica, I can't just pop down to the shops and get a foot switch. And had I known at the time our comms techs had a spare foot switch, I would have just gone and borrowed it, but I didn't. So I went down to my workshop and I found every little bit of rubbish you could make a foot switch out of. So it's just like a little... Oh, have you died? Yep, she's gone. Okay. Just under the plywood there's a little micro switch, limit switch with a roller on it that we use for some stops on bits and pieces of machinery down there. We had a couple of those spare, so I grabbed one of those. I folded up a little gal bracket, and then I had the problem of how do I get the foot pedal to come back up once I push it, because the micro switch wasn't strong enough. So I found a thing of springs, but the problem when you compress just a normal spring is they like bow out and flick. So I found some bits of conduits and I made a spring holder, and probably put about 5 or 6 hours of work into making this thing work properly with the door hinge. But in the end, it worked really well and saved my arms.
MacGyver.
Antarctic MacGyver.
Antarctic MacGyver.
One of the really cool things about down there is you get to see a lot of sunsets and sunrises, because in the wintertime they happen at really odd hours, like 10 o'clock in the morning. So the sunsets like this would last for 1 to 2 hours because the sun's so low on the horizon, and it sits just off the horizon for ages and ages. So you get these really cool photo opportunities to get out there, and some of the colours you see down there, the cameras can't do any justice whatsoever. It's the most amazing purples and blues and oranges you've ever seen in your life. Unfortunately, this season we had a ridiculous amount of blizzards, and when we didn't have blizzards we had clouds. So I think we saw 2 auroras the whole season. It was a bit poorer than what I'm used to, but anyway, that's the way it is. And if you look in the bottom right hand corner, that's that super bright light on a little blue building. I know it's hard to see on the projector. They're our ring main units, so we run a high voltage supply around the station, and then we have transformers all over the place to bring it back down. So there's quite a bit of noise on station from the powerhouse because we've got these lines going everywhere, working as giant antennas for us. So here's me in true Antarctic style.
Flourishing.
Yeah. Once I'd realised that I could make a foot switcher to work, and the next problem was how do I hold the microphone near my face. So I found an F-clamp in the workshop and bolted it to the desk, and then just used a little spring-loaded woodworking clamp to hold the mic up. So looks really dodgy, but it worked a treat. And I guess that's the big thing down there, is you don't have a choice but to improvise. So I had a great time down there learning about radio. I mean, I did all my my advanced course in that before I went, but getting there and then having to work through all these problems, I didn't have any choice. I had to research every little thing to the nth degree, and like the advanced course had laid that foundation for me on my electronics knowledge, but there's nothing like getting hands-on and just tracking things down for yourself. So
it's the best school.
It is, and when you break something, it's really good to try and work out how you broke it and how to fix it.
Did you leave the foot switch for the next guy?
The foot switch is still down there, but I don't think we'll have another amateur radio operator for a long, long time. It seems quite rare these days. So it's a bit sad, but that's the way of the future. We get to do some other cool stuff down there other than just radio. So here we did an 18-kilometre walk along the sea ice to go and see the seals pupping, and we've come here just after, maybe within 24 hours after giving birth. So if you look up there, that blob there is a baby seal. So they're Weddell seals, and that little baby would have been about that long. So while we were there, you could hear all the females giving birth, like screaming. It's a really really horrible sound. But yeah, they just pop them out on the ice like that. This was early enough in the season though that there were no predatory birds there, so we get these big birds called skuas, and they're like the vulture of Antarctica, and they'll be there picking up all that afterbirth, and they'll even have a go at the young ones if they get a chance. So they'll quite often, if you've got the baby penguins, they'll harass the parents until they just move out of the way, and then they'll smash the babies, and that's the end of the chicks. So here we are. This is how, that's the doctor up there and myself. And this is how we did our walk. So we've got these little sledges, and we just throw all the gear on there. So it's quite amazing how much gear you have to carry down there. There's minimal survival gear you have to take with you. So you have to take spare socks, thermals, sleeping bags, bivy bags, sat phone, PLB, Garmin InReach. It's crazy now. Your minimum pack weight sort of sits around 16, 17 kilos with no food, no drink, nothing. So it's if you can get it off your back, it's a really good opportunity to do so. So I think this was in end of September, early October we did this trip, and it was really gnarly weather conditions just before it. We'd just been up and fixed a VHF repeater out near what they call the Brownings Peninsula Hut, which is way away from station, and it's the repeater that covers from the Wilkins Aerodrome, which is right up on top of the glacier, all the way to station. It hadn't worked in nearly 2 years, so I went up there with the comms tech and with the station leader and the doctor, and we all knuckled down and did pretty much a complete rebuild, swapped the repeater out, new solar panels, just went the whole hog on it, new batteries, everything. Yeah, it's not fun climbing hills carrying car batteries, but this is another thing. That's the doctor again. We've got all these monitoring cameras for bird life for this one. So this is, if you look sort of, this whole area here looks nice and flat and like dirt. That's all penguin poo. So, yep, that's where they nest. So these cameras sort of just aim at the net. Sorry, I'll just shut this up. These cameras all aim at the nest to allow the scientists each year to go through, and they'll have PhD students and that count every single penguin in a frame, so they can log how many penguins are there. So it's incredibly crazy the lengths they go to. But every year we've got to go out twice a year and service these. So you service one at the end of summer, and then you go back at the beginning of the summer. So it's a pretty simple thing. We just pull the lens cover back, clean it out, check the batteries, swap the SD cards. They've got a little solar panel down the bottom. You can't see, and there's a little like a Pelican case down here with the batteries and whatnot.
And the camera's in a Pelican case as well. Is that a Pelican case?
Yeah, it's a Pelican case with a little custom dodgy shutter. So yeah, scientists don't know much about electronics. It's pretty.
It works.
It's pretty crazy, some of the stuff we see sent down. So back in Australia, you guys get weather forecasts, so you know what the weather's going to be. And we get weather forecasts in the summer when we've got a full-time forecaster down there. In the winter time, we get this thing called an ensemble. And so this is how I get to predict what the weather's going to be and whether or not I should run out and rapidly remove my antenna. If you have a look here, these two columns here are the key features that I look for down there. One is wind speed and the other is direction. Now, wind speed alone only tells a really small tale there, because at Casey you get this really strange phenomenon that's kind of like what happens at Mawson, like the catabatics, but you get the wind accelerates down the glacier and down towards the station. So if the wind's coming from the east, so anywhere from 70 to about 110, 120 degrees, add 20 to 30 knots at least to the wind speed. So if you look along here and you follow, this looks really, really nice, and you go, oh yeah, what's that? That's 50 knots maybe. You think that's not too bad, but then you have a look up here and you go, oh, that's in that golden zone of death. So 50 knots is suddenly 80, 90, 100 knots. And I made the mistake a few times of relying on the accuracy of these things, and you can go to the time here and you can go, oh, what's that, 12 UTC on the 22nd, it's picking up, so I'll make sure my antenna's down by that time. But sometimes this whole hump shifts this way considerably, and I made that mistake a few too many times, and it ended up resulting in me being off air for about 2 months just because it broke me. Like, you can only rebuild antennas down there so many times before you just get disheartened. So, after losing a few antennas, I thought, well, it'd be a great idea, instead of packing the antenna away, to just lower the antenna to the ground and just tie it off. And stupid me didn't realise that if you get a lot of snow at the same time as you get wind, everything blizzes up and you get these big blizz tails, as we call them, and they all appear downwind of an obstruction. And seeing my radio operating location is downwind of the biggest building on station, there's about a 4 metre berm of snow here. So my antenna was maybe anywhere from 1 metre to 2 metres under there for the entire length of one side of the fan. So that took me about 7 hours to dig out without destroying the antenna. Good lesson learnt there. So this one is another example. This is the snow berm that I was talking about. So if you look in the sort of the top right hand side of the picture, you can see the yellow building. I don't think this has come back to life, has it?
Yeah.
Oh, it has. Ooh,
Yeah.
There you go. So you can see that building there. My hut's just here. So these are the guy ropes for my antenna, and I had a look at that ensemble, and I'm like, yep, Saturday afternoon, the wind's going to come up. It was Thursday night. I'm like, I'll just leave the antenna up tonight, I'll go and operate tomorrow morning, and then I'll pack it away. Well, I woke up tomorrow morning and it was already 45 knots, and I can't lower the antenna in 45 knots. And from there it proceeded to 117 knots. So that little tangle there is what was left of my 40, 30, 20 and 17 metre fan dipole. And that was the end of my operating for the 2 months. So that was really, really, that was a killer for me. And it's hard to explain down there because the fact that in the wintertime you don't get the sunlight, it really messes with your motivation and your energy levels. So we were getting maybe an hour a day of sunlight in the middle of winter, and you go home from work feeling just absolutely destroyed. Like you're so tired, and it's like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the arvo. So when your antenna breaks, you don't have the motivation to go down the workshop and rebuild it again. And after I'd lost about 4 antennas, I'd had enough. I'd snapped a couple of fiberglass squid poles at that stage, and yeah, I thought I'm going to take a break. So conditions weren't ideal. It was really cold every day. Then it was minus 25, minus 30, and even the shack was at like 1 degree because it's not built for habitation in winter. But the other cool thing about being the building services supervisor is I get to go everywhere. I'm sort of the main man down there. So this is our receiver hut out the back of station, out to the west. And from there we used to run 6 V-beams. And I had the great idea that, maybe I could hike onto a V-beam and use that. Well, needless to say that out of 6 V-beams, 0 of them are functional.
Oh.
So every V-beam either had a broken set of open wire feed lines to it, or one of the legs of the V-beam had snapped off, or the feeder going up the mast had snapped. And unfortunately all the masts out the back are condemned because of however they used to put the anchor points for the guys in the ground. They used to use some sort of sulphur concoction, and that apparently corrodes it. So they've all been condemned, and we can't repair any of those antennas. They made really good receive antennas. I received the US fantastically. It just worked as kind of a long wire, but for transmission there was no hope. The losses were insane. I couldn't get anyone in Australia full stop, and that was running 400 watts. It was never going to happen. So these are the vehicles we get to drive around in, called a Hägglunds. They're I think it's a Swedish or a Finnish, maybe Finnish ex-military vehicles. Swedish, yeah. And we've juiced them right up now. They've got Cummins QSB45 common rail engines in them, like they really go. We've only got 2 with the tray on the back, and the others have all got like the front section on the back, so you've got an enclosed cabin as well. So luckily there's a few places on station you're allowed to travel alone. This is one of them. It's about 3 kilometres off station, so it's a nice place to go and get away. And you can only do it if you've got a reason to go out there, but being an electrician I had to do inspections out there anyway, so yeah, I got to go out and do that. Sorry. I did do a site survey out here as well with the dipole and the 705, and it was quite quiet out here, but at that time the network was faulty. So the optic fibre cables to the transmitter and receiver huts both there are both broken, so we've got Wi-Fi links, and at that stage I couldn't get, I was using WF-View, which is a free program to run the Icon transceivers, and I couldn't get reliable connections out there, and I wasn't going to go to the effort of putting up trying to get up that mast and put a dipole on that. So when I found I couldn't use the V-beams, that pretty much just shut that whole idea down. But pretty cool place to get out and visit. So here's some more shots like I was talking about before. The colours you get down here are crazy. This is directly opposite to where my shack is. I'm standing on top of a big fuel tank here to get this shot. And that's the science building you can see, and that's that blue power distribution building RMU. So in the summertime all this snow's gone and all these pipes are exposed, all the site services, so it's a completely different feel to the place. It's a lot more like a mining camp than Antarctica in the summertime, but in winter it's quite beautiful. one of the other things we get up to down there, you've got to find your own fun, and it's getting really hard nowadays. So does anyone here work for Polar Med? No, they might see this video anyway. This will be banned, but it wasn't banned when we did it. So we do sort of 3 nights a week. We do an ice bath. This is our tank house where we keep all our water, and this big copper contraption here is the melt bell we lower into the lake to melt the ice and get the water out. There's 2 spares there. We had a sauna in there as well, so we'd go in the sauna at 100 degrees for 25 minutes, and you feel like you're going to die, and then we'd go into these ice baths and sit in there, and I think the best time we got up to was about 16, 17 minutes in the ice bath. So yeah, it's all part of the experience. Like you can run outside and dive in the snow, but where the tank house is, it's really icy. You don't want to go running because you're going to go on your back and hurt yourself. And there's also the other horrible phenomenon: if you stand on cold metal with wet feet, you stick to it. So yeah, we get up to this sort of thing, and it's really one of those places you've got to be creative and to have a good time. Everyone works together, and you have some fantastic experiences. So we do lots of fancy dress, that kind of thing, themed nights. Now, I've told a few of you before that quad bikes are banned, and that's technically not entirely correct. So at the moment, quad bikes are banned for recreation, but they're still allowed for operational use. So what we have to do is go and drill the sea ice every now and again, and there's a project in there called the Heil project. A scientist named Petra Heil is studying all the sea ice. So we went up to this, it's called the Swains Island group, and we're standing on, it's probably about 60 metres deep under where we're standing right now. But we had to go and deploy these monitoring buoys, and they monitor the ice temperature, the amount of sun that goes onto it, any movement from waves, and they've got GPS units, so if the ice breaks out, they track, and they connected by Iridium satellite back to Australia. So we had to go out and drill all the ice and do sort of like a stakeout and work out where we could and couldn't put these things, because there's a lot of rules with sea ice, is how far from land you can go, how close to the ice edge. We just had a big storm which blew away a lot of the sea ice. So myself and that's our carpenter there, Hayden. We got to go out there for a day and drive around on quad bikes with a really big drill and drill holes everywhere. So yeah, it's pretty fun sometimes, but at the same time it's pretty dangerous. So if you're not paying attention, like we had to come down this hill here, and if you come that way a bit further, there's cliffs, and you get this funny thing which I didn't know about before I left Australia, but this thing with surface definition. So you think in Australia you walk along, there's a dip in the ground, you see that dip, you know, oh yeah, I'm not going to step down that hole. In Antarctica, and I believe anywhere where it snows really, if the light's at the right angle and it's overcast and whatnot, you can't perceive any changes in the ground. So you could think you're walking straight along and there's a cliff right there, and your brain just says that's flat. So quite often people fall over a lot down there when there's poor surface definition. It's the reason you can't land planes in certain days, just because you cannot tell what the ground's doing. It all looks flat. So it's a really bizarre phenomena. But until I'd been down there, I wouldn't have believed it myself. I would have thought people were yanking my chain. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. One of the other things you get to do down there is, because we're in such an isolated environment, you don't have access to all the different trades. So we had an unfortunate incident where we've got a thing called a overrassen, which is a giant sort of toothed beastie that goes on front of a loader and spits snow out. And it's got this giant sort of, if you think of the old Scott Bonner mowers with the big cylindrical blades on the front, it's got 2 of those, and they go into like a gearbox, and they've got shear pins. So if they hit like ice that's too thick, instead of the blade tearing or bending, this shear pin lets go. Anyway, one of our guys out there in -40 or whatever Wilkins was trying to get the new shear pin in, and just had his finger in trying to feel where the hole was, and it moved, and it took the end off his finger. So then the panic set in about how do we make it so this can't happen again. And we decided that there was going to be a tool, or Kingston decided there was going to be a tool be made, and they sent down like a terrible hand sketch, and like it was really poor. So I got onto the CAD software I've got and I drew all this up and sent it back to them for approval. And then it turned out that no one else bar me there has got any machining experience. So, I mean, back home I build like underwater diver propulsion vehicles, which is like a tow behind torpedo, that sort of stuff. I got lathes and mills and whatnot. So I got tasked with the job of building this thing. So yeah, you get to do some pretty cool stuff outside of your own job. That's probably one of the better things about being down there, and it's really appreciated that people have all these extra skills. So yeah, I got to play on a lathe for a day. I had to make 4 of these up so that we had 2 main ones and 2 spares, because we've got a couple of machines up there. So that's it inside, like a test fit to see if it'll go through. So on this side here, you got that big blade, and that's the gearbox just there, and like the 2 flanges that interface together. So yeah, that was a bit of fun, but it was a bit sad as to like the reason we had to do it. And yeah, that made someone's winter a really bad time. Luckily, he's got used to his finger again. So another thing that happens is our beautiful satellite dome is getting quite old now, and we can't buy these. I believe they were a type of a military panel they used to use on the satellite dome, and we can't buy those anymore. So we get these white panels now, and they just don't seem to be quite as strong. So we had a big wind. This is late in the season. We'd already had that 117 knot blow, and we'd had another couple of 90, 100 knotters. And this was on a day that didn't seem to be that bad. It was just from a slightly different direction. So instead of being east, it was slightly southeast. And we think it picked up a couple of rocks and hurled them at it. So it turned out there were 3 panels damaged. That one gone, that one up there, and I think that one there, just under there, was split. We had to end up taking all those out and putting plywood in because we didn't have spares for those panels. So yeah, you never know what your day's going to hold in Antarctica. You go down there thinking it's going to be a nice easy day, and then someone goes, "Oh, have you seen this?" and your day goes downhill really quick. So yeah, we had to leave that while the storm was raging, and there's a little door down there, and some of the guys wanted to go inside and inspect it. Sorry. Yeah, some of the guys wanted to go inside and inspect it, but if you'd opened that door when the wind was blowing, the pressure drop would have just blown all the panels out in the place. So luckily I got a hold of them before they did that. So that was that stayed like that for about 2 or 3 days before the wind died off enough and the conditions were right that we could do it. And we've also got to do these job hazardous analysis sheets before we can start. So yeah, it adds a bit of time to everything. Also get to do a bit of other stuff. I got to do a bit of comms stuff with our comms tech Andy down there. He needed a bit of a hand to do some fault finding. This is what we call the tandem delta. It's the HF antenna we use to talk to the planes, and it wasn't working. It looked perfect on SWR, but you just couldn't transmit. We could hear the guys at Davis transmit to us. They couldn't hear us. The plane couldn't hear us. So that cable there is LDF 750, I believe it is. That's pretty nice cable, and we decided we had to prove that cable was good before we went any further. So we got some LMR 240, yeah, that beautiful stuff.
Small one.
Yeah, that's a 110 metre run. So we got a 100 metre roll of LMR 240 because it's what we had, and we made a fly lead up, and we calibrated the VNA on that, and wanted to get an idea of the loss in this line to make sure it wasn't faulty. And there was just shy of 6 dB loss on the 100 metres of LMR 240, and at 20 megahertz that had 0.4 dB of loss at 110 metres. So it's a pretty nice cable. So we did that, that was all fine, put that back together, and then we found that one of the insulators on the transmission line had popped off, and the transmission line was just laying again. Sorry, when I say transmission line, not the feed to the antenna, but the transmission line, because it goes from there, it goes up, goes out, and then it goes along the ground and then back up. And so where it went along the ground there, it's got these little plastic insulator cups that sit on the ceramic, and they've got the wire, the feed line tied in them. That had popped off the side and was just resting on a guy wire, and just the angle we were at, you couldn't see it. So yeah, once we proved all that and we tested it, we got it all working, and it's been working since like a champ ever since. But really, really cool to get out and do this sort of stuff. I'm sure not many people get this kind of an opportunity, but I was really blown away to hold a bit of coax that size in my hand, and then see it on a vector network analyzer to see how low loss it actually is. It blew my mind. Yep. Okay, there's a video now. So, Ubuntu. So, we flew out this year, and unfortunately, this video I'll show now, it didn't go quite to plan. So the plane came in, beautiful, crystal clear sunny day when we drove the 4.5 hours up to Wilkins Aerodrome to catch our flight out, and 10 minutes before the flight came in, the fog came in. So I'll quickly play this one for you, and you'll get to see what we got to see. So we were really excited at this point because we could hear the plane. And just sort of keep your eyes about here. Hello, goodbye. That was the end of that flight. So we were not impressed. We'd been promised by the station leader at that stage, if the flight didn't land, that we'd have our winter rooms back. Went back to station, and our winter rooms had been reallocated to other people already. So the already low mood hit an all-time low. And yeah, that wasn't ideal. So we had a lot of very upset people.
Not happy to.
Next day, so that was an Airbus 319. So I think they're about the size of a 737. That's what we usually fly in. The next day they decided that if the weather was bad, the 319 can only do 2 holding patterns before it doesn't have enough fuel to get back. So that's what happened there. They did one, didn't come down, did another one, came down for that pass and went home. They decided they were going to send the C-17, the big military plane, down.
Oh no.
Oh no, not oh no. This was fantastic. So this is this is a real man's plane coming in. Much nicer day, luckily. So keep in mind, these planes are what they drive the Abrams tanks in. So quite spacious. Spirits were very high at that stage. So that was a win for us.
How often do they have to remake the runway?
Every year. So they stay up there till about March, April. Like the last flights go at the end of February, early March. They start there to March, April, packing it down, and then everyone heads back up in sort of early September to start again. So it's a crazy amount of time invested in that runway to get it going. And it's a pure ice runway, so I'm not sure, Rex might know, or Kim might know, or someone might have a better idea of me, but I heard that once upon a time we wanted a snow runway, and Wilkins was guaranteed to get all the snow in the world, so we built the runway there, and then they changed their mind and decided they wanted an ice runway, and we were committed. So I'm not sure how much truth there is to that.
I think there is truth to it, but also on top of that, because it's glacial and it's moving, every so many years, I think it's about 5 or 7 years, you've got to realign it,
Yeah.
because it's no longer pointing in the direction you want to land in.
Yeah.
So they spend a fair bit of time making a new runway.
Do they have to allow extra length because of the ice?
I don't think so. So it's a 2.8 kilometre runway.
It's grippy, because
Yeah.
it's groomed.
Yeah, they groom it. They tear it all up.
It's granulated effectively on the
Yeah.
surface. So it's not, if it was wet ice, you wouldn't stop you landing in the sea.
Yeah.
So the conditions of when you can fly, like over the summer when the melt's on, well, they've stopped flying now, I think that's correct. Last flight, did you come out the last flight? Or there was
No, I think there was one more.
Yeah. So the flying stopped down till February.
Yeah,
So
so cool, yeah.
standard length, like with the air, landing the plane in the snow, to landing a plane normally, what is the difference?
I think the 2.8 kilometres is the set minimum runway length.
Yeah. Regardless.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a CASA dictated thing.
Yeah.
So here's us inside the back of the C-17, so you can see a little bit of leg room here. I was really, really stoked to be in here, and you can see like these are shipping containers. That's an E-box there, which is a tiny bit smaller than a 10-footer. But loads and loads of room. I was actually surprised they let us take photos in here, which was pretty cool of the guys. But yeah, they've got these nice little runners up here, and they just push the cargo up and it rolls on the runners, and then they lock it down. So a really awesome system, and we were all like really, really elated to not only go home, but to get a flight on a C-17A. Everyone bags and says they're noisy, they're uncomfortable. We all loved it.
It's a lot of space in there.
Yeah. And it's, how many people can say you've been to Antarctica and you've flown to Antarctica in a C-17A? So, yeah, I was pretty happy to get that.
In-flight service?
We did actually get some little doggy bags with some bits and pieces in them, but yeah, it wasn't great. That's looking forwards in the plane. Up there is where the pilots are, so we got to go up into the cockpit and have a bit of a look around. But yeah, really awesome way to end the season. So I think that's about all I've got. Yeah, but I'm happy to take any questions if anyone wants to know anything.
What's the most craziest thing that you weren't expecting or ready for? I mean, it's your third trip now, this one, I think. So, I mean, for someone new going down, what would blow them out?
Oh, for someone new, everything will blow you out. You just can't fathom the weather, the amount of snow you can get. So we've got a road down, is it in this? It's hard. It's really hard to see on this projector, but down here is a building called CUB, Casey Utility Building. So that's where my main role there was to get this brand new sewer system online. So I do industrial sewer sort of stuff back home. I've just finished commissioning two $150 million plants back in Shoalhaven. So they're big plants. They're like the size of this entire base. So probably the main role I was there for was to get this fancy new membrane bioreactor sewage treatment plant. So it's like a really small, the building would be not much bigger than this, and that's a full sewage plant with pretty much drinking quality water coming out the other end. So anyway, that's down here, and you've got this little road there that goes down to it. Now that's downhill on an angle like that. It's nothing really steep, and you think, oh yeah, that'll be great, we'll get down there, no worries at all. Until you get a blizzard, or even a bit of snow and some wind, and snow always aggregates wherever there's like a shadow for the wind. So that whole road fills up, and you can get these berms of snow like this high, and you'll be walking along happy as Larry, like I'm going to work, boof. Because the surface definition's really poor, you don't see it coming until you're in it. You can't climb through it because it's like powder, so you're digging through and you fall over and you go deeper into it. People cannot fathom that amount of snow can occur within like an hour. It's when the snow happens, it happens quick. And it's not snow like here that's sticky snow, you can't make snowmen and snowballs. It's like ultra dry powder. So,
I guess what I was more asking is like things that you wouldn't expect just in your everyday functionality of what you're doing down there that change because of this or for that.
Okay.
It's just so dramatic you wouldn't have thought of it in,
yeah, well, there's a really key thing here that that no one believes in the real world, and that is whatever job you do in Australia will take at least 3 to 10 times longer down there. So where in Australia you need a door hinge to go to hardware, well, we go down to our workshop, which is that orange building there, but then you have to find the right door hinge. So what would take you 10 minutes in Australia can take you hours and hours, and we know they've been sent down, but the problem is you get people unpacking stuff that aren't that trade, and they're like, oh, that sounds like a good place to put it. We lost a switchboard about as high as this and about that wide, we couldn't find for 7 months, and we knew what building it was in. So it turned out it was in, we've got this, what we call the green store, which is where all our stuff is kept, and it's got these big motorised compactus aisles, and so you've got like electricians, diesel, comms, whatever. Well, someone had the bright idea that they'd sit this in the carpenter's aisle on top of a bit of carpenter stuff and then put something else on top of it and cover it. So it was pure accident. We'd given up looking by the time we found it. So yeah, everything down there is just difficult because you don't have access to gear. Generally, whatever you need, if you can't find it, you've got to make it, or you've got to adapt something. So yeah, everything just takes so much longer than the real world, and the thing I like about it is that you don't have that choice. You have to make it work. So whether I have to get on a lathe and make that tool myself, or I have to strip down some electronics control circuit and actually go to component level repair to get something working again, That's the kind of stuff we do. And you've got to remember too, like that, just there, that blue building, the powerhouse, that's our life. So if that powerhouse dies, we die. Well, we probably wouldn't die initially, but it wouldn't be nice. We do have another backup one just there, emergency powerhouse, but you can't really rely on things to go smooth. So you've got to be prepared to work through any problem at any level of technicality and solve it. And the internet down there is poor. Like, you can't just go and Google something and expect it to pop up. Sometimes the internet works really, really well, but the Bureau of Meteorology shares their internet connection and they dump a lot of data back to Australia. And if that's happening when you need the internet, or if you have people on Netflix.
Zoom worked pretty well then.
Yeah, Zoom worked well that time.
Yeah.
But then
I was surprised.
I did an interview with the guys in America, the Ham Radio Roundtable, I think it was,
Oh yeah.
and that didn't work well. Yeah, people down there, like, some people are considerate, some people aren't. It's different every year. Yeah, you get groups that get on, you get groups that divide. It's just part of the challenge of working in like a really remote environment with people you've never met before. And usually you all go in together at the start of a season, so you all rock up to the division in August and you do your little thing together, you're training together, you meet everyone you're going to be with, and then come usually 25th, 27th of October, you fly down to Casey. That didn't happen this year, so some people went in 25th of October, some people went in early November, I went in 10th of February. So everyone had already made a team up and I was meant to be one of the bosses down there and I rocked up like right at the start of winter. So it can be a challenge, but that's part of the fun too.
Do you find people play mind games purposely to muck things up?
Some people do. Generally you hope that the screening process pulls all those people out early, but some do get through. So it's part of the diplomacy of being a supervisor or whatever position you are down there to work through that kind of stuff. We do have a station leader who's sort of oversees the whole operation, but the problem is if things go really bad, you're stuck. You can't get people out. You can't get ships or planes in there in the wintertime. It's not achievable. So you've got to nip all the problems in the bud early on in the piece, and you've just got to get along with people. So you can disagree with people and not like people, but at the end of the day, you've got to work with them.
Did you expect the response that you received when you were operating?
No, that blew me away. So I went down there just thinking I was just going to be Joe Blow on the radio, and I turned into some sort of nerd celebrity. So,
you had people faking your call
I
sign.
had people faking my call sign, which blew me away. Like, what do you get out of pretending to be me? I'm no one special.
Superstar.
But I'd have people email me, go, "Oh, thanks for the contact yesterday." And like, I wasn't on air yesterday, and I don't have an antenna for 15 metres up.
Maybe it took that long for the email to get to you, so because
Yeah.
from your Bureau of Meteorology.
Yeah. So I mean, it was crazy. I had whisper decodes coming back for bands and days I'd never operated on. I had people all around like Europe and that going, "Oh, thanks for the contact. It was fantastic talking to you."
It's happening a lot lately.
And I had to get back to them and go, "Look, sorry, I know you think you spoke to me, but that wasn't me." Like, all these people are super elated that they've got to talk to Antarctica, and then you've got to break it to them that they didn't. But a really weird place to work, to operate radio from. You get that polar flutter. I don't know if anyone heard me down there, but it's like really rapid, like rapid QSB, and it kind of makes like a warble to your voice and whatnot.
Like a long path.
And yeah, I'd get that sometimes, but not all the time. Then I'd get that on some signals I received, and the phenomenon you get down there is just really bizarre.
Do you know roughly how many contacts you would have had?
I think maybe around 1,600. I pretty much, after the first 2 days, I started telling people that I wasn't interested in making contacts just for contact's sake. And I mean, that was probably a bit selfish of me, but I'm not into amateur radio to like fill a logbook out and make numbers. I'm in the radio to talk to people, meet people. I mean, back home I hold what's called an advanced level cave certificate, so we go out in the Nullarbor on cave diving expeditions, and like amateur radio was just another safety factor for me in those sort of pursuits. So when I talk to people, I want to have a bit, like at least a 2-minute conversation. At the end of the day, some of my conversations went for well over an hour, and I got a regular group of guys that would talk to me for half an hour every time. So that was really fantastic. And once I sort of put the word out on Facebook and on my little blog page and that I was really just there to have a chat, it turned around and it was fantastic. You'd still get the occasional guys that just wanted a quick QSO, especially the Japanese, but they're super polite. I never would have imagined in a million years how polite the Japanese contacts are down there. Yeah, it's no muck around and whatever.
Paul, we've got a question from the stream, which is, did you contact any other hams from any other Antarctic bases?
I actually did.
Oh.
And now this was like in the last days of operating. I'd packed the 7300 and everything away. I had a 705 and an amplifier left out, and David, Fox Kilo 4 Kilo Tango, I believe it is, French guy, emailed me, and we'd been trying to contact for a while and it just hadn't worked out. He was in Tasmania and wanted to talk to me. I'm like, oh look, I don't have the gear, I can't do a VK contact at the moment. He's like, well, I'm heading down through Mario Zacelli and on to Concordia. We tried to work from Mario Zacelli, he only had a vertical and couldn't get a contact. I went to the people in stores and managed to get my 7300 back, and he got to Concordia. We tried on 20 metres, no success, and I said to him, look, I think 20 metres is probably, we're going over each other's heads. What if we try 40? Took him 2 days to make a 40 metre antenna, and we finally worked on 40 metres. Really, really hard contact because he's French and very broken English, and I'm English and have zero French. Yeah, but that was a really fantastic contact to make. I didn't have any other success in Antarctic contacts. I know there were some other guys at McMurdo, I think it was, operating in 1 or 2 other bases, but the propagation just didn't seem to work for those
I think there were
contacts.
some Russians down there as well.
Yeah, it might have been, yeah.
From memory. That's a thanks from Mag71, whoever that is.
I did manage to work a few pretty cool contacts though. I got a contact with a guy in Alaska, and that was a genuine 5.9 contact. And I worked a guy long path in Italy and Germany as well. And if I had my other computer with me, I could have got the voice recordings off it, but you cannot believe how difficult it is down there, because I've got those birdies on the scope and I can't hear anything on those, but in between those I've got zero noise, like it's dead quiet. So you hear the faintest of faint signals, and anyone I try to work like a long, long way away, like Europe or North America or whatever, you've got like hundreds of other signals going over the top. So if I was to go short path to Europe, the Japanese would just destroy everything. I only had a dipole, I couldn't choose my path, but luckily the guys at the other end had some pretty specky antennas, and they could choose to go long path, and we tried working short path, it was no good, they couldn't hear me at all, I couldn't hear them. Going long path, they popped out of the noise, so yeah, quite interesting, but I have a recording, and I don't think I played it on yours, I might have played it on the ham radio roundtable one, but it was a typical contact afternoon for me, working a couple of Japanese stations, and there would have been 70, 100, 150 stations at the same time, and it's exhausting to your brain trying to pick call signs out. And it got to the stage where I'd get one letter and I'd go station ending in Lima, and you'd work back from there because that's all you could do. Your brain couldn't get all these numbers in one go. And like with the QSB, some station would come up over someone and they'd fade out, and another station would come up, and yeah, even running split, that helped them hear me, but it didn't help me hear them. I still got millions of stations at once, not just a pin.
What the expeditions go through.
Yeah.
With 40 or 50,000 contacts.
Yeah, those guys are committed.
You got to be kidding.
Yeah.
What about the issue you had with the Ionosonde?
Oh, okay. I really wish I could have turned the power off to this stupid piece of equipment, but I know there's a scientific reason. So I'm there. Down here is the Ionosonde. It's about a kilowatt transmitter. And it just spams the HF frequency. So it'll start at, I think it's like 2 megs. And it'll go over that, and then it'll move up a block and a block and a block. So you'll be talking to someone, and then this tick, 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 tick picks up in volume and just wipes you out. And you've got anywhere from 3 to 15 seconds of you can't hear a thing. And that was a really, really frustrating thing to have to deal with. It. If propagation got better, the Ionosonde got better. Like, I mean, it was only a kilometre away, but propagation seemed to have quite an effect on it. So if the band was open to a good destination like North America, the Ionosonde was open to me. So yeah, you'd quite often miss half a QSO because coming in.
Were you getting the data from the Ionosonde to find out where the MUF was and all of that sort of stuff?
No, so I don't know if that is used real time
Oh, okay.
or if that data is just accumulated. I never did get around to emailing and finding out.
So I think you can look it up on the net.
Yeah,
But it'll give you
One
the
or two. Yeah.
Casey one, yeah.
Yeah, right.
They were probably using the internet like you were talking about to send all that data back, but anyway.
I don't think that would have been much of the data. But we've only got a 10 megabit connection. Like it's chalk and cheese from what we had the first time I went down. We had, I think, 1 megabit in 2015-16.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how good it is now. But it's still, compared to the real world, terrible. And when you've got 26 other people there that all want to go on Facebook and all want to do this and that, yeah, it's really, really hard.
Even
So
phone updates, now that everything's online and a lot of the applications you're running are online,
yeah,
there's a lot more traffic that's really not doing anything apart from going back to a server somewhere to give you the information you require. It's a real pain.
yeah.
I would think that a certain amount of the attenuation and your signals coming in is going to be due to storm activity,
Yep.
acting as a curtain. But do you ever get thunderstorms down there?
No, you don't get thunderstorms down there ever. I think, no, actually no, I don't think anywhere on Antarctica has ever had a thunderstorm.
You've heard thunder, haven't you?
I've heard thunder at Davis.
Really?
Yeah, 1981. We arrived, there was a big black cloud over the station.
Wow. There we go, one thunderstorm in Antarctica.
in 100,000 years you get
A big storm of 81.
He might known as the owl storm.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, you don't get that stuff down there. You get a lot of blizzards. And it's also can damage your transceiver from the static, so you've got to disconnect your antennas when you're not using them. I spoke to a guy that had been a comstick down there that was talking about it arcing across the PL259. So it's pretty crazy. So it is literally probably the most extreme environment you can operate ham radio in. I was concerned that coax wouldn't survive the cold, and coax survived quite well until the blizzard hit and shredded it. But that wasn't the cold's fault so much.
So you took down a fan dipole.
No, so I took down a lot of wire
Okay, right.
and a lot of RG58, and I made everything down there.
Okay.
I had a homemade vertical as well, and it was terrible. It just picked up every ounce of noise on station, so that lasted about a day, and I scrapped that idea.
So what was your noise level like?
So generally on 20 metres, there was nothing. You had those birdies, so every, I think it was 60 kilohertz was a birdie.
The UPSs or something like that?
It was speed controls in the powerhouse, turned out to be faulty
okay,
two of them.
yep.
So we've got new ones there going in now, but I couldn't fix that, we didn't have spares. So I tracked that down. I don't know what caused the issues on the lower frequencies. So like I went around with my tiny SA on a loop antenna, and I could pick up those birdies in the powerhouse, but I couldn't pick anything lower up. I know we've got a rheometer there, but I don't think rheometers transmit at all. That was pretty close to me. But yeah, pretty much 40 metres had a noise floor generally around S5. 80 metres and 160 metres were like 20 dB over. Like completely unusable. I really wanted to have a go on 80 metres from down there, and there was no way it was going to happen.
Probably all the computer mesh and stuff. What about a receiver?
Receiver farm still had a bit of noise.
On low band?
Yeah. Yeah.
What, so S3, S5?
No, S7.
Shit.
Yeah, it's still too much to operate.
Okay.
I don't know. Like that's the killer for me. Is like that the receive farm's 2-3 k's away from station. You shouldn't get noise, but obviously because of all the HV lines running everywhere, they operate as an antenna and they transmit noise everywhere. So that was a bit unfortunate. I did get a chance to go out to Wilkes Station. So Wilkes Station is the old American station that we got given in '59, I think it was. So it's just like a a derelict station now, all under snow, but we've got a little hut called the Wilkes Hilton. And the week before I was due to start my handover, because you get the new crew in and I've got to sort of fill them in on everything that's gone on and how to do things. So the week before I got to go out there for a weekend, and I took my radio, and lo and behold, the wind ripped up straight away. So I was sitting in the back of a Hagland in 40 knots with my squid pole up and a 20-40 metre fan dipole. Yeah, I was a bit worried about me and my mast surviving. But propagation that day was atrocious. So I had zero noise on any band. It was beautiful, but I couldn't get anyone. I managed to contact with a guy, Maritime Mobile, halfway across the Pacific. And that was the only contact I could make and one of the only I could hear. And that was running 100 watts, so it was just barefoot. But you get days like that down there where the bands are just dead. They don't open full stop.
You activated a very rare park down there too, didn't you?
I did. I activated VKFF0571, and the Wilkes station is 0572. So my goal was to go and do that, and I'm like, this will be easy. And I got one contact. So for 3 hours of work, I got one contact. And
so you go down with a couple of kit bags of personal gear.
Yeah.
Is there a limit on how much hardware you can take with you?
Yeah, so you're allowed 1 cubic metre up to 250 kilos. And I maxed mine out because I took my radios, amplifiers, I took my triathlon bike and smart trainer so I could keep fit. Didn't work out too well. I took my computer, my big screen. The big thing down there is you've always got to have escapes. So if you want to get away from people, you have to have activities you can do. You can't just go down there and rely on everyone else to keep you occupied. So I took all my stuff down. I would have loved to have taken my 3D printer and some bits and pieces down, but I maxed out early on, and that's what I had. So that was the issue. Was I took a little soda beans 10 metre pole. I took 2 9 metre squid poles. That was it. That's all I could take. And I ended up getting some scaffold tube and a big old solid fiberglass rod that I'm not really sure what we used it for, but it was in my aisle and no one complained when I took it. So yeah, I had a bit of a concoction going on out the back of the hobby hut, but it got the job done. I got to work the world from $5 a wire. So yeah.
Yeah, so apart from the foot switch, in hindsight, if you had the opportunity, what you know now, how could you have prepared yourself differently?
I'd probably look at running a beam antenna and probably look at somehow getting a better mast set up down there. I'm sure I could do it. I'm in the position where I can make the calls. So yeah, I'm sure I could do it, but a beam antenna for maybe a hex beam or like a 20 metre Yagi 3-element or something like that.
Sure, 40.
Yeah, would have been awesome.
Try 6 metres.
Yeah, could have tried 6 metres as well.
That C-17 had enough space in it.
Yeah.
Send it down.
Yeah. That would have been really nice to have that sort of stuff down there.
Yeah.
I probably would have taken some like phase noise cancellers down. I think I was pretty well set up, but maybe a bigger radio like a 7610 or something like that, rather than just a 7300. I'm glad I took 2 radios. Like the 7300 worked flawlessly, but had it failed, I had a backup. And I think the worst thing you could do is go down with 1 radio and die early in the piece. It'd just be devastating. And I would have liked to take some more project electronic stuff down there, work on building some little transceivers and whatnot. So you just got so much time down there that there's nothing really to do. So like I had to work out my power, I had an oscilloscope hooked up to the dummy load, and I was doing all the calculations off the waveform to work out my instantaneous and peak powers and that sort of stuff, just because I could. Like here you go, is my power meter accurate? Well, I had the equipment there to check. So yeah, I did a lot of stuff like that. But yeah, I'd like to take more electronics gear down. I didn't have the capacity.
Did you engender any interest in the other expeditioners?
I actually had the general manager of the Antarctic Division was just down, and he got on and had a chat to one of my mates in VK5, and I had the comms on as well. So yeah, they were pretty keen, but yeah, other than that, I was just a station nerd. So yeah, no one in the day of internet really had any interest in it.
It's a long way to travel for the next exam day, Justin.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean,
C-17A.
the people that had interest were like genuinely interested, like thought it was amazing and whatnot. But the kind of people we had down there, it's just not their thing.
Just thinking of your noise, and you're running diesel gen sets.
Yep.
And you being a Sparky, you would have run quite a few VSDs and that down there.
We do have a few VSDs, but I've been through and checked the screening on all of them, it's done correctly and whatnot, and I don't believe the VSDs were the issue.
You weren't running active harmonic suppression down that way.
Now, I have had a lot of problems with that back home, but no, we weren't running that down there. So all I can assume, yeah, UPSs maybe, or some poor switch mode power supplies somewhere. It only takes one bad power supply to wreck a place. I took one down as well. I got one of my mates in my club back home in Mid-South Coast Amateur Radio Club loaned me a beautiful, I think it was an MFJ switch mode, just as a backup, and it was flashier than my little computer power supply, so I thought I'll just use that. And the noise was off the charts on every band.
Remember, MFJ is 95 jump.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, that was one switch mode power supply that just ruined my experience and nearly made me give up on day one. I really thought this place is doomed. And I'd spoken to Kim before I went down, and Kim's like, oh, it's a noisy station. I'm like, oh, it can't be that noisy. It was.
Interesting observation, like with your hobbies, you're into cave diving and that. That actual treatment plant thing, we actually had it running for quite a while, testing and all that out at Self's Point.
Yep.
One of the guys who was pivotal in that.
Hacker?
He's into the same crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, you seem to find a lot of the guys that go down south are just that kind of, I guess, personality. Like, you've got to be a little bit crazy to go down to Antarctica. You can't be too crazy because they won't let you there, and you can't be completely normal because you wouldn't want to go.
What's your nickname, Al?
Allowing for all of those things, it doesn't explain a few other things.
Was there a log, or is there a log for the different operators that end up there to make a few notes and
No, that
tell the future for the future operators?
That would be cool to have, but no. And it's really unfortunate now that we don't have that many amateurs going down. So everyone I talked to said that I'd been the first amateur they'd spoken to on an Australian station for quite a few years. I don't know if anyone else has been down there, but it's not a common thing.
Yeah, Doug had a licence, but he didn't operate one year. I think he might have come on once for like Anzac Day or 100 years or something like that. I can't remember.
Yep.
But that's been a few years ago.
Yeah, so.
Do you plan on going back?
Not right now, but I've got a young family, so I'll see how things go in the future. I've got a lot of other things that I need to go and do now, and a few cave diving expeditions to go on, and yeah, there's no end in sight for me of hobbies. So I just went and bought a whole heap of new hiking gear. Hope my missus isn't watching this video.
Edit that out.
Yeah, delete that bit. But I had planned to go and do soda here in the last 2 days, and unfortunately I had to go for a safety meeting at work on Tuesday, which had a really good outcome. And then today was forecast thunderstorm, so I decided not to go, and it turned out quite alright. So
there was a thunderstorm this afternoon.
Was it?
Lightning.
Okay, I didn't hear it from just down the hill here. But yeah, it would have been nice. I was going to go and activate 3 peaks in one day. So yeah, that would have been a nice 24 points in one go. And you guys have got so many peaks here that I don't have at home. Like my normal soda activation is like an 18-kilometre round trip that takes hours and hours because you climb 800 metres during that 18 k's. Whereas here, it's all just here. So
you've got 695 to choose from here in Tasmania.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a lot. I've probably got maybe, I don't know, 180 in New South Wales. Yeah, okay. It's not that many.
It's called the Switzerland of the South.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I realise that, and it looks pretty fantastic. I'd love to spend a bit more time down here doing it. But, yeah.
Any final questions for Paul?
Yep.
Sort of a technical question. What's the ops building used for now? The yellow building, which was the comm centre, of course. It's
still where we run our comms from. So we've got radio consoles there that remote connect out to the transmitter and receiver farms. Our station leader's in there. The Bureau of Meteorology runs their office from that. So it's still quite heavily used.
Yeah. I would think that the comm sensor's a lot smaller now, or is it you've still got the consoles and...
So
The consoles went years ago.
yeah.
Oh, sorry?
They went years ago.
Yeah, but didn't he input the new Zetrons in, wasn't it?
Yeah, we've got the Zetrons there now.
Yeah, there's another generation. There was a console that Ian developed, a Linux-based console, and that's gone now. We've got new Zetrons in now. So basically, you've got a server and screens and just a computer.
Yeah. Because it meant there was quite a bit of space before.
Yeah.
So
But there's more gear in there now. It's all fairly crowded.
Yeah, they just keep chucking stuff in. It's all IT now. There's so much IT gear in there.
is it used much during, is the comm centre used much there?
So we've got full-time comms operators in summer that stay up in
Yeah.
there, and it's used really heavily with the air operations and whatnot. In wintertime, it's pretty much unmanned. So usually, like your station leader's in his office up there, and it's usually between the leadership group. Someone will take like a roster of comms on. So yeah.
It seemed a long way from the Oakwood to be so far away from the guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Zetron console that's in Casey one's the only one that's sort of reasonably well implemented and going. The Mawson one is ready to fly up, and Davis is a while away because of some noise issues in the server, so there's a record going there. But it's quite a neat system in as much as you can operate any station from anywhere. So if they have a situation occurring on one station where they need everybody on deck, they can run the comms from another station, which is quite good. It does give you a little redundancy. The of course, it's on satellite stays in the sky. But yeah, it's quite a flexible, pretty flash system, but it's not fully resolved yet.
We got another question from VK5COL. Probably a silly question, but radio conditions during the southern lights, during the aurora.
I can't speculate on the auroras really there, but it said it was there on our forecast, and I didn't notice any changes in radio conditions. Everything seemed to operate as normal. I didn't see any enhanced or suppressed propagation conditions.
Did you notice a change in propagation in the hours after the aurora, after 24 hours afterwards?
Not that I can guarantee, because generally, like the 20 metre band would close for me around 4 PM local time. 40 metres would close at around 8, and I didn't generally hang around after that when the auroras were pretty prolific. So I can't really speculate on the hours after the auroras if they had any bearing on it or not. I imagine they have more bearing on the upper frequencies than the lower, but that's pure speculation.
Was there a tendency to ignore the clock and just work through? Extend your working day,
No, not really.
Day
No. So like at the end of the day, you need to work the hours you need to work. So our contracts are very loosely worded, which pretty much says if you need to work the overtime and you're not fatigued, you work the overtime. It generally didn't happen. Like we had a pretty good run of we'd start at 7:30 in the morning and finish at 4:30 in the afternoon. This season we had Saturdays off, which is the first time I think it's been implemented properly. Usually you work like a half day Saturday, and I've had meetings and it was determined that was pointless because people don't really work, they just fluff about. And that was a big morale boost to the team, and everyone just got in and did their job, so we really didn't need to work extra hours. It worked out quite good.
And was the food compatible with your likes?
Yeah, we've got our own chef down there, so I've got really fussy eating. My stepson's autistic, and he probably eats better than I do. So but the chef looks after us and sort of does things to what each of us like. So it's a pretty good environment there. Yeah.
Cool. Bit of a strange question. You know how you said you can't take set luggage or set things?
Yep.
Could you leave, say, a couple of antennas back there and then bring more antennas and that down?
You mean leave them in the station?
Yeah.
It's a bit tight on space down there. If I knew I was going to be back the following season, I don't really think it'd be an issue. I'd get away with it. Okay. But for multiple seasons, it's not achievable. Things go missing down there all the time because people move things to where they think they should be. So yeah, I could definitely leave an antenna down there, but it may not be there when I get back.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day too, like antennas aren't your biggest like space consumers. So a beam. Yeah, but a beam packs down pretty small. Like when you unbolt everything, you put all the elements parallel because it's counted on volume. So the box can be 8 metres long, but if it's only 5 centimetres by 5 centimetres, it's not a big volume. So I don't think antennas are the killer. There's other stuff that takes up a lot more room, like your actual radio gear, because you package things really well. Yeah.
Any further questions for Paul? How about a round of applause?
Thanks everyone.
And we've got a gift from Reast for you for your presentation.
Oh wow.
I hope that you enjoy that.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Really good.
I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Yeah. Very fascinating.
A very awesome experience.
There's some maps here too, if anybody needs any Antarctica maps, so we know where things are.
Would you recommend it to people at the bottom of the
Yeah.
apply?
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth, if you've got the opportunity to get in and do a summer, I wouldn't suggest anyone does a winter without knowing what they're in for, but if you've got the chance to get in for a summer, it's a fantastic opportunity and experience. You get to meet some amazing people, you get to do some pretty cool stuff, so yeah, definitely worth going down, trying a summer out if you can get through recruitment, and see how you go from there. You might get hooked on it like I did.
So the only prerequisite is not too crazy, but just a little bit crazy.
Yeah, just the right amount of crazy.
If you know anybody or yourself, you want to go check, there's a 10 position open in Casey at the moment.
Yeah.
Opened up yesterday.
Cool. Summer, winter?
Yeah. Oh, negotiable, in fact, I would say.
I reckon you're going to winter if you just
Well,
want to
winter,
do
yes,
winter.
It's definitely for a winter, but when you come back, it's the open negotiation. You can stay for the next summer, or you can come back later in the year.
Yeah, they're pretty desperate for it.
Here's a good question for you. Which season is better for you to go down? Which season do you prefer?
I like winter, but I like the challenge. I mean, it's different now. I've got kids. Winter's not really super achievable for me.
Yeah.
I prefer to do a year at a time though. Have a year on. So my last winter before this one, my best friend died while I was down there. Had motor neurons disease and passed away, and I made the decision then that I didn't really care about the money, and I just have a good time. So I got home and I had 9 months off. And just did whatever I wanted to do, and it was fantastic. So if I didn't have a family, that's what I'd do from now on, is I'd work a year down there and have the rest of the year off. And it works out. I mean, you're going for a contract. You're not guaranteed a job any time. They are starting to talk about doing 5-year contracts, but if you could reliably get a contract, and there's a lot of things that contribute to that, but if you could reliably get a contract, I'd happily go for 12 months and then have the 9 or 10 months off and then go back for another 12. Yeah, you earn enough money down there that you can survive. You don't earn a lot of money, but well, not compared to what I can earn at home.
You're not spending a lot.
You don't. Yeah. Well, it depends if you've got eBay.
Yeah.
Credit card.
Yeah.
You might have spent it all before you went.
Deliveries. I'm assuming there's a lot of deliveries that don't
surprisingly, there's not, but there's shortly going to be a transverter and a few other bits and pieces.
Yeah.
So,
What's the food like?
food's really good. Yeah. I mean, you don't get fresh food. You get fresh food in the summer, and then you eat all your fresh food early in the winter, and then you're on to whatever's left. So, yeah, the food early on is really good, and the food later on is okay.
What's the booze situation like now?
It's pretty much cut. So the homebrew's gone now. So that's done and dusted, and the alcohol allowance that you used to be able to take down has been halved. So I think it works out now. You can take 10 standard drinks a week. So it's going to hurt them in the long run, but that's the agenda they're choosing to follow. So I know there's quite a few people now that don't want to go back. And
has there been any incidents or something to relate to that in relation to bringing it making it like that with falling or injury? Or
I don't know how the politicians work, but there was talk of it being blamed a lot on sexual harassment and whatnot. I can't really speculate on how much of that's really in it. That's just what our director said. So
Well, if the police can't do it anymore, then why should we?
They still
Well,
can't,
it should be
then
limited to 10 standard drinks a week then too.
Yeah.
That'll last about 3 years.
That is the only downside down there, is that I really think if they work in head office back here, that they should have worked down there, because people make decisions in Australia that seem like a really small issue in Australia, but it's major down there, because you imagine you're so limited in what you can do. But all that aside, it's definitely worth going down once and having a go.
When was the last time somebody went off the rails, or even worse, went amok?
I don't know of anything.
Must happen sometimes though.
Has it
probably
comes
does.
down, or? Yeah, over the years that periodically has happened, and they'll bring somebody out early if they think they need to.
Yeah.
But normally, the selection process is pretty good now. And, well, there was a case where a station leader was taken off the ship in Freo the day before the ship was about to leave to go down, and they decided this guy was too big a risk. I don't know what happened. Something must have happened in the previous 24 hours. It was pretty horrific.
Yeah.
So they will respond if they need to. But if you've got a good station leader, often they can mediate their way through, because that's one of their roles.
Yeah.
And most people will come to the party.
It has happened though.
Yeah, it has happened.
Happened to Mike.
do you ever get any?
No.
I know you said about if something happens over the winter, you can't get people out because you literally can't.
Yeah.
Is there ever a situation where, for example, someone badly injured or had to be evac in some way that is there any way at all of getting in, or is it?
So there was an evac last year, I think it was.
Yanks.
The Yanks did it, but that was pretty, it's amazing they even pulled that off.
Wow.
It's one of those exceptional circumstances. Like one of the chippies that I was with, he put a bandsaw straight through his finger and cut it. Which one was it? That one. Pushing timber through and cut it clean through and severed it off.
Yeah.
And they stitched it back up, and he had to finish the winter with it. They just cannot get you out. There's like something goes wrong down there, and the people down there is all you've got. So you'll have a carpenter that's a surgical assistant. We get to do 2 weeks of training in Hobart Hospital.
Good fun.
Yeah, don't hurt yourself. Not ideal.
I'm guessing the flip side of that, though, is that also there's probably a degree of safety involved where because you're aware that you risk, there's a high risk.
Safety down there is crazy levels. Like it is so heavily safety oriented, and so yeah, we don't have the access. I mean, it adds a massive overhead to every job, but we have regular toolbox meetings every morning, and we got these little. We did have a booklet before. Now we've got an app on the phone that you do like what they call a take fire. So you take a couple of minutes to go through and identify.
I stood for Hydro and they do exactly the same thing. It's even called take 5 there as well.
Yeah.
And they have the books that you fill in.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I think there was a case of if I've got my memory right, a butcher from the mainland going down and doing something else ended up doing the anaesthetic training.
Yeah. Yeah. It's anyone can do it. Anyone going down, you just got to be identified, and you got to show that you're interested. So if I was to go down and go, look, I really want to do anaesthetics, and they thought they'd be happy with me, then I'd get the opportunity to go and do anaesthetics. So yeah, it's got nothing to do with what you do in the real world.
Is that a bit like with the comms tech was probably a bit happy that you were helping him out with that, even though you were there for a different reason?
Yeah, it was good for him to bounce ideas off me. Yeah. So yeah, that was good for me too, to get to play with some really big things. So yeah, it's great for your mind and for your like your career and that to build different skills. Like I got a ticket to drive a front end loader, so like one of those big Caterpillar front end loaders. I'd never get that in Australia. Like why would I bother? But I've got the ticket for it. I've used it plenty of times, so now I could probably go and get a job as a loader driver. You just get exposed to all these different things that don't happen in the real world. And yeah, it's a pretty cool opportunity in life to just do something completely outside the box. And you come back and there's 2 types of people. People you come back and you say, I've been in Antarctica, and they're like, oh wow, that's awesome, tell us all about it. And people are like, oh yeah, okay, see you later, and they're gone. So, and the same thing happens in Antarctica. You've got 2 types of people that I've ever identified down there. People that go down and go, I love it, and people that go down there and go, I don't want to be here. And quite often you see people going for a summer, and then a week or 2 later they go back out. And the good thing about the Antarctic Division is you're not penalised. If you tell them, like even if you're booked in for summer winter, and you do the summer and you go, oh look, I don't think I can do the winter, I'm not really prepared for it, and you go home, that doesn't have a bearing on future employment. So you can go back the next year and try again. So it's really good like that.
So you'd say they're a very good employer then?
Oh, they're a fantastic employer. Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty heavy regulated area. Like, there's a lot of things you can and can't do, but they do look after you. You've got access to like psychiatrist help if you're feeling down. If you really want to do some sort of a ticket before you go, if you wanted to get your bulldozer ticket or whatever, and you mention that early on, there's probably a chance you can do it. They do. It is changing there because a lot of it's decentralised now. We've got a lot of stuff going from Canberra and that, where it all used to be here. But if you find the right people to talk to, they're pretty accommodating in what they'll do. So they have been great to work for. Yeah.
Thanks again.